Welcome to the Wholehearted Way podcast, brought to you by the Wellspring Group. I'm Nathan King, co-host for today's episode and facilitator for the Wellspring Group. Our guest today is Pastor Bobbi Lassiter. Bobbi is associate pastor at Covenant Methodist Church in Dothan, Alabama. In her role, she was involved in introducing the Wholehearted Living discipleship program to her church and has preached and taught on the topic of living with a whole heart. Co-hosting our conversation is Mandi Wellington, operations manager for the Wellspring Group. Bobbi and Mandi, welcome.
Thanks so much, Nathan.
Hello.
Bobbi, I'm so excited that you're here today. I love just the position that you hold at your church. I know a number of your leadership has been using the Wholehearted series and some of the other tools that Wellspring puts out, including the battle process. And so you, both your leadership and some people in your congregation have been intentionally moving toward this pathway. And I was just curious about what's given you the confidence to invite people into this pathway.
I think the number one thing of making the decision to create that invitation for our entire church was that we started small with our staff. After me visiting a battle for myself and after having some amazing men invite me to experience it with them, I realized that it was something that God had been laying on my heart for many years and had created a new way for me to invite others into what I had already been involved in for myself. Um, but yes, so like that what I've already been involved in for my own personal self, that I was finally like, oh my gosh, like there's a legit pathway for me to now invite not just leadership, not just staff, but congregation too. And when I saw that my staff hesitantly, our first little group that I created of some of our women, say yes to it and watched how God moved in them throughout those weeks of doing wholehearted living together, that I realized that God was up to something huge and that was really, it changed the entire culture of my staff from that one little moment. And so it gave me a bigger, bold invitation placed in front of me to say, if it can change the culture of my staff, what else can it do for our entire church? But it was also God reminding me, like, little step by little step, have mustard seed faith type movements so that He can really create those roots that need to be created and grow them as deep as possible for it to actually become an entire culture.
That's sounds like a really intentional way to approach this.
Yeah.
I've been involved in introducing programs like the Wellspring, Wholehearted Living, and Battle for the Heart to other people, and they're different because we're not talking about we're just going to read a book together, and we're not talking about we're going to do it's a discipleship program where we just study scripture. All of those things are really good, but you're telling people that we're going to explore vulnerability and different ways of describing that process, and it kind of throws people for a loop a little bit, and they feel a little concerned about it. So you had to have some sort of crossing of the threshold personally to get comfortable with that. What was it that you experienced in yourself that made you intrigued?
Yeah. So, okay, backstory is that for several years, I've been doing this process in a few different ways, not Wellspring itself. And I was first introduced to pretty much the foundation of what Wellspring is about um, when I was going through ordination stuff for my prior denomination. And we had to do a certain type of training that began to make us look about what are our lies that were created within our lives and how it can show up in our responses, how it can show up in our ministry, and then learn how to capture it and rewrite it so that we're not trying to heal ourselves as we are encountering other people and their own lies. And that wrecked me I'm just gonna say, like, that it's called Clinical Pastoral Education class that we had to take, and it was harsh, and, it wasn't a loving environment, but what it taught me brought me about on this pathway that said, "I'm a different person now because I understand these parts about myself, that I wasn't aware of." But then my heart goes, there's gotta be a better way. There's gotta be a more loving and kind way for others to experience this because it was so transformative for me. Um, and then I got asked to step into another pathway that has the same foundation as faith walking. And when I described it to Larry, maybe last year or the year before, he was like, they had to have gone to Wellspring at some point. But it's called Faith Walking. And it's another institution or group that does a lot of the exact same things that Wellspring does. We did all over Zoom because it was COVID. And also because we were all over the place. Our little groups and cohorts lived in many different states. But we did pretty much the exact same thing you do in Wholehearted Living, Wholehearted Community, all that stuff, and everything that had just been introduced in clinical pastoral education. But my brain kept going to, I love this, but I need something more. And I got into this kick that I was like, I need leadership to hear me, that if we could create a rhythm of a retreat and then do these things that we're doing, the teachings, and we had a coach and we were learning about our lies and learning about capturing them and rewriting them and how we show up and how we can have different language and the feelings and all that stuff. And then I was like, but then we need to have another retreat in the middle of it. And then we come back and we don't get left alone and we still go through this together because that one's a 3-year process. And I was like, but then we need to have another retreat. Like every 6 months, we should have a retreat. And then I get to Covenant, and Mike Woodham's like, hey, I'm involved in this thing called Wellspring. And I think you have the same heart that I have. I would love for you to just come and sit and experience a retreat and then tell me your thoughts. And I get there and I was like, okay, God, this is exactly what was been placed on my heart for the past 5 to 7 years. And I even told Larry, I was like, I had dreams and visions of this. And I was like, and here you're doing it. And so it didn't lay the foundation. There was already a foundation laid. And it was finally like, okay, you don't have to beat your head against the wall anymore. You don't have to create it from the ground up like you were trying to. And you don't have to get leaders that are above you to buy into it, to give you the money for it, that it's there for you to step into. And I shared that with Larry and he was like, holy cow. But it solidified that what I had been thinking about, dreaming about, visioning was that it really was God. It wasn't me. And that was the coolest part.
That's amazing to hear that you had these pieces come together from various sources and then encountered it at your current church. That's amazing.
And the fact that I'm not even supposed to be at my current, like the way that I got to my current church is a whole part of it too, that we had to make the decision to move here because my mom had been sick at the time. She has recently passed, but it gave us the opportunity to spend extra time with her we wouldn't have had. And so this was never on the plan for me to be here, or at least on our plan. It was always on God's plan, evidently.
Yeah.
So,
as you learned. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's, wow.
Yeah.
That sounds really profoundly meaningful too.
Yeah.
One of the things I wanted to go back to is you mentioned lies.
Yeah.
So for someone listening to this who doesn't have exposure to these types of programs, when you say getting into these lies that you tell yourself, what would be an example, maybe something you've experienced or that you've seen other people struggle with in terms of a lie?
Yeah, so the the very first, lie that I came to understanding that I have that has lived within me since I was a middle schooler. Um, so having those profound moments in our life, mine is they always are in the childhood for the most part. But to have those moments of your body, your mind, your soul creates a survival technique, a survival statement for you to be able to live through it. And 90% of the time in my life, it is a full on false statement of who I am. And and then I unknowingly live into it for almost my entire life until I was I'm about to be 44 next week, so about 40. And mine is I'm not enough. That was the very first one. That I believed that I was not enough since I was a middle schooler. I was a kid that was overweight, struggled with my weight for a very long time. And I got loud and obnoxious. And I sought approval and love in all the wrong areas because I just believed I wasn't enough. And so it lived through me in every single aspect of my life, and big time in my ministry. I would never trust that I could be given the opportunity to step into something because I'm not enough. I don't have the resources. I don't have the capability. I don't have X, Y, and Z to be able to answer that portion of the call. Um, and it really it stunted me for so long. But yeah, about 4 years ago, I came into understanding that was a huge one that lives in me, and it still rears its ugly head.
Mm, that's a very vulnerable for you to share that that you walk around with this belief that you're not enough and that you have exhibit A that when you were in middle school, you struggled with your weight, you could point to, there's the proof.
Yeah, yeah,
See, I'm not enough.
yeah.
And you carry that around and it influences your decisions. And so it's not only a lie, but it's a secret lie. Like
Mm,
you don't want to share it.
yep.
Right? It's because it's so vulnerable, and I say that from my own experience, thinking about the lies that I believe, which I relate to, of coming to, I have to do
Mm,
something for someone to know that I'm valid as a human, which sounds like it's a similar talk track or belief, and that's really hard to bring up. It feels heavy. You don't know if people are going to be able to carry it or if it's going to expose you as less than. So you encountered that. I think you said in not a loving environment is where you learned about that? Is
yes.
that
Yeah. Yeah, the environment was clinical pastoral education, and, we have always joked around with other pastors that have walked through it, is that, your day is not finished or your instructor will not let you go until someone cries. And it's literally because you are having to, they want you to re-meet those traumatic moments, and it was hard. So, we talk about, all the ones I've asked to do Wellspring and Wholehearted, that they're like, "Oh my gosh, this is wrecking me." And I secretly laugh because 'cause I'm like, "If you would have experienced it the way that I did, you just would not function." But yeah, very
not
unloving.
not very good marketing for persuading people to wanna
Yeah.
go and do
No,
that.
no.
What is it like, what was missing from
Mm,
that you later have I think you started to cobble it together from different
yeah.
sources and then kind of found that the Wellspring programs offered it. What was missing from it that made that useful to understand your lies and build from it in a way that wasn't just without love?
Yeah, I would say probably community, like actual legit community, not just a group that you're forced to be in. Um, True vulnerability, not forced vulnerability. And then knowing that you are not let go, knowing that you always have people that are and the way that Wellspring, says fellowship around you that are fighting for you, that you actually believe that to be true. And it's not just I'm gonna have the meeting and then not talk to you for like a week, week and a half, and then talk to you again during the meeting. But like the regular check-ins, the regular, um, truly asking, what are you feeling? What's on your heart? And that kind of thing. And that's why I was so adamant about because faith walking is phenomenal. And I absolutely it just began to really allow me to dig deeper in a safe place. But I missed that component of community. I loved these people dearly, and they are some of the most precious people that I've had in my life. But we were too far away to be able to ever get together. And that it just, you know, Zoom's
You
great for
needed
certain
local.
things. I need a local. I needed someone that was living everyday life with me, and then someone that I can, stow away time with, that I can have those intense moments of, 48 hours, 72 hours together where we are focusing just solely on all of this stuff rather than having the distractions of everyday life.
What do you think makes community like that so important to vulnerability? You talk about the regular touch points and all of that. What is it that requires that level of consistent interaction?
Yeah, trust. I mean, the building of trust, and that's what was
Mm.
missing with CPE was that, it was a forced thing, and it was I'm gonna keep coming at you until it comes out of you, and I pushed back, and the reason why it was really super hard for me is that I pushed back and I wouldn't engage, because I was just like I'm a stubborn person, and I was like, "I'm not telling you any of this, like, I don't know you." And she would not allow that, and I'm thankful that she didn't because she had my number and she knew that she had to push me, for that setting, but there was no trust, and there was no trust with the other 2 people that was in the group, and so that's the thing where I've seen it blossom in our staff and in our church is that, we have been you said intentional earlier. We've been super intentional on how to put these different groups together and who to put in which group, and, um, that has been the game changer, to say the least, because you've got to realize that there are landmines and relationships you don't know about, but if you do know about them, you don't put them in the same group. Like, it just that creates it a much harder and lengthier time for them to gain that trust, and it's hard enough to gain trust when you're not used to being vulnerable with anyone.
Yeah.
What do you think gave people the courage to begin to trust?
Mm, I think if you would have asked my first group, is that I was willing to be vulnerable with them in the process. I think that the tides turned when I started sharing different parts of my story.
As a pastor, as a leader,
Mhm.
you are entering into this conversation in a vulnerable way.
Yeah. Yeah, and that took a hot minute for my first group to, really be okay with and trust, because here I was and we laid it on the table. So my first group was some of my staff ladies. I'm I'm I don't see myself as their boss, but they see me as their boss, right, as the pastor, and, we had to lay it on the table that I understand I'm asking you to come into this space. And technically, the dynamics are a weird set of dynamics because I am the supervisor of one of you and I am the pastor of all of you. And we just have to place it there and say, we are aware of it, we recognize it, we acknowledge it. But then I told them, I was like, but I am coming to you as another person along this journey with you. And whatever you say here stays here, and it does not affect how I see you as a boss, it actually and what really happens is that it actually helps me to see them better, and helps me to
Wow.
understand them better as a boss, that I know what's happening within them. I can better understand, how to have conversations with them and that type of thing. But yeah, it was a weird dynamic that we had to really lay on the table.
And what I heard you say was you were vulnerable first
Mhm.
with them. And that's been my experience is that if you were the person in authority
Yeah,
and you want vulnerability, it comes by example. And
100%.
I learned that in the private sector in working in leadership roles in business. So it's not like a structured thing of like we're going to have vulnerability in our business. Like you don't really think
Yeah,
that way,
right.
but at some point I maybe subconsciously realized that I'm going to have a better team if we are vulnerable with each other. We're going to be more productive, and it's going to be more fun to work there because you're actually going to have a true relationship.
Yes.
And but what I had to do is I had to go first.
Mhm.
And the first time I had to admit a mistake to my
Mm,
team, I felt like I was in front of a firing line, like I was gonna be shot for they were gonna lose all respect for me because I wasn't perfect. And many people in positions of authority think being in authority means I don't have flaws. And if people see that I have flaws, they will not respect me, they will not trust me, they will not work for me. But it's the opposite.
yes.
Mhm.
And that's what you were able to demonstrate to them. I eventually came as a leader to realize, "Oh, good, I made a mistake. I can demonstrate, I can
I
set
could
the
use it.
example by admitting it to my team." But
Yeah.
that was hard to get there. But it sounds like that's the way you approached this was, "I'm gonna lead a team, and these people, I have authority in some way over the entire group, but I'm going to show vulnerability first, and then they will be encouraged to reciprocate."
Yeah, I've never been the type of leader that 1, I'm a reluctant leader 90% of the time. But 2 is that I have always believed that if you do not have a relationship with the people that you are above, that you're leading, that you have supervisor responsibilities over, why are they going to listen to you? Like, who are you to come in? I mean, you know who you are and you have all these credentials and all these different things and experience, but that doesn't matter when it comes to like the everyday things. And when you are asking them to do big things, when you're asking them to sacrifice their time with their friends and their family, you're asking them to do something completely different. You have to spend the time of creating those relationships and creating those spaces to where, and I know it does get a little weird that like, you want to be able for them to be able to share their hearts with you, that you're their boss, and the fear is that if I share with you that I'm struggling in this, how is that gonna affect my job? Will it mean that I'm gonna lose my job? And that's a
Mhm.
big fear, and I get that, and we acknowledge that, but if you can't share that with me and me see, like, where I can help come alongside you to help you be who God has called you to be, um, what am I doing? Because I
I
don't
agree.
have staff. I have partners in ministry. The problem is that when we see our staff as staff, and not partners, and you can only be partners if you really have those vulnerable, truthful spaces with each other. That's the way I see it.
Mhm.
Mhm. I can connect
For
with that.
vulnerability yeah, go ahead, Mandy.
Now, I was just gonna take it to a place of I'm over here curious to know the fruit. Like, I'm picturing this group of ladies who you're being vulnerable
Mm,
with, and it's like setting the table for something, and I'm like,
yeah.
"Ooh, what are the goodies that got to happen because of this vulnerable conversation?"
Yeah, so we got to break some huge strongholds and some lies that had been living boldly on the surface and then have been hiding underneath the surface, and not just of them, but of the entire staff. And that it got to create to where um, there had become an exhaustion of ministry because they had gone through so much, many different hurdles over the past few years, that now there is I want to be a team. We are a team. And also is that I want to help you. How can I help you? And then standing in their authority of their position, that like, guys, we trust you. You're amazing at what you do. Don't second guess yourself. Like, go and do it. And it's now like, this is who I was called to be. Let me go and do it. And then that first group of women, when they started changing, the rest of the staff was like, hello, what is going on? And then and here's where Nathan, you talk about mistakes. This is when I had to realize that I had made a mistake of not sharing with the entire staff of what God had been placing in my heart and my mind, and why I was starting with this one little group. And that my vision was that then another group would happen, then another group would happen, and that eventually our entire staff would get to experience this. But it has to be little by little. I didn't do that. And so then I had people watching this one little group change, and they're like, why aren't you doing that with us? And I was like, oh, Bobbi. And so then I sat with them individually, and I was like, okay, my bad. Let me talk about what's happening in my heart. Let me talk about what I hope and dream for it to be and where it's going to change. And then we started another group. And then my colleague Nick, who's knee deep in Wellspring 2 with us, he did it with a guys group. And then now we have congregation members that are leading a couple other different groups. But it was that that mistake was like, oh, okay. And the fact that I did acknowledge it, they were like, oh, well, thank you for saying that. And I was like,
Yeah.
it was totally my bad, But yeah.
That's a great example.
Yeah.
I'm kind of shooting from the cuff here, but I'm gonna throw something out, and you can just shoot it down if you want. But
You're good.
I'm curious to know. I'm going back to your comments about the lies earlier. Maybe the lie that I'm not enough, but it seems like there was some motivation for starting out small, and like there was something holding you back in that moment.
Mhm.
That the group that felt like, hey, why didn't we get invited to the table? Like they were kind of calling that out of you in some way.
Yeah. So two things. One is that we started off small and I sat with Larry at that first retreat, and I was like, here's my goal. But I feel like if I'm going to get my congregation to completely change their culture, um, and if my staff has never been involved in it and experienced it for themselves, we're going to beat our heads up against the wall. And it's not going to take footing in the way that I really think God is wanting to do. And Larry confirmed, like, yes, start small, start with your staff, and then go from there. The other was that, and I love that you said at the table, because that's my second lie, is that I believed because I'm not enough, because I'm a woman, I don't belong, I don't have a seat at the table. And so that has always made me hesitant when I have these moments of knowing strongly of what God is trying to do, what He's placing upon my heart, is because for so long, that when I've come to leadership and been like, I think this is what God is calling us to do, that it was met with, well, and so it was that I need to see if it works like, I need to see if I'm crazy or not. I need to see if this is something viable, because I didn't fully trust myself. And that lie did not come out until that actual was it that one? I think it was the second battle for your heart, that I went to with the guys, and I was like, "Oh my gosh." And, Joel Boyd and, Mike Woodham both looked at me, he goes, "Do you realize that you are sitting at a table of all men, and they're the ones that have invited you into this space multiple times, and that your lie says that you don't belong at the table because you're a woman?" And they just, like they, in that very kind and loving manner, laughed, and they were like, "Are you kidding me right now?" Um, but yeah, that was a big part of, like,
Wow.
treading very lightly, knowing, one, we needed to start with our staff and start small, but then also still second guessing whether or not, I was really hearing what the Lord was saying, or in hindsight, was that whether or not I was trusting that God could use me in this way.
Yeah. I think that's what I was picking up on, and I can really relate to that, Bobby. I appreciate you
Hmm.
sharing that. I can relate to the hesitating, and holding back and tiptoeing in versus, stepping fully in. So, I'm really thankful for your courage to move,
Mhm.
even if it was starting small, or kinda however you started. I'm really thankful for that. I'm thankful for your ladies that responded in vulnerability. I feel like there is this, like, what I'm hearing is this: you took a risk and you invited these ladies, and then these ladies took a risk, and by their willingness to let the Lord in through the process, to just to go through the process and let the Lord into that space, their change, their countenance, and the things that people were witnessing just began to invite and draw people
Yeah.
into something, I'll say more, but can you
Mhm.
help define what the more might be?
Yeah, something deeper, something that is no longer surface. Um, Deep, true relationships that change the
Mm,
world, and that changed their lives, not just, their individual lives, but one of the other big aspects is that it changed families in this process. It changed marriages in this process. Um, and that's huge, right? Because I think also one of the reasons why God had me start with our staff was that ministry people, especially those that have the responsibilities of ministry on Sunday mornings, um, we sacrifice our own selves. We sacrifice our souls. We sacrifice our own personal relationships with God. We work ourselves to death for our people, right? Or at least that's what we say. And we never have these spaces that are to where we can truly dig in deeper with our relationship with God. And I immediately, in the very first meeting with my ladies, is that I said, "This is part of your job. This is not a personal small group. This is not um, a thing that you do extra hour, like, on your own time." I was like, "When you're working on this, is that you're on your job. Like, when you do your homework, that it's part of you can do your homework during your ministry hours," is what I was trying to get to, is that your daily job, you're on the clock, whether you're salary or hourly, that this is part of that. Because we all too often sacrifice our own hearts, and we do it because we don't feel like we have time, we don't feel like we have the space, we don't feel like we have the allowance of it. And I wanted them to understand that, like, I see you as a person. Like, I see that if
wow.
you're not healthy, we're not going to be healthy together. And why would I be okay with having a quote unquote staff person who is struggling because they're giving everything they have to the church, what good is it for our church to grow if you're not growing and you're not healthy? Because I don't think true church growth and health happens when your staff is not healthy. I know it can look like it. You can have great, amazing numbers, um, but that's not what we're called to be and what we're called to be about. And so
Mhm.
that's something I stand on a big time, is that come challenge me on that. But if you are not providing the space for your people to be a part of a small group, to really dig into this portion of their life with God, then you need to relook at how you are as a leader.
Mhm.
What strikes me about that is you're talking about in the context of church leadership.
Mhm.
And it's also true, possibly even more problematic in outside of church environments.
Yeah.
And people are telling themselves in the workforce that they must cut out all of these squishy heart aspects of themselves because they're too busy.
Yep.
They don't have time.
Yep.
What you're saying is there's a cost to that. And I don't know if it's because we're spiritual beings, which we are, or if there's even something about the quality of how they show up that gets taken away from that. But I mean, I'm sure you see this amongst your congregation. We live in this time of great uncertainty. We live in this time of extreme busyness. How do you use that to point them to this way of life or way of being that you've encountered? I'm curious how you shepherd people in who are dealing with that.
Yeah, that is I think that is what the biggest downfalls of our entire society is that we no longer see each other as human beings. And that we've created corporate areas of this world that really just don't understand people. And there's a difference between allowing people to take advantage of you and take advantage of okay, so I think that's one of the fears that corporate people stay away from, or typically, is that if I go into the emotions, if I go into the personal, I'm gonna lose my authority, or that I'm gonna lose the productivity of whatever job they have. When I push back and I say that actually your productivity will skyrocket if your people actually believe you know and you care about them, and that you know them on a personal level. You can still have those boundaries. I mean, I still have boundaries with my ladies that I go walk through these with, right? Um, but is that I help them remind themselves that, and we modeled this through doing a sermon series on Wholehearted, is that it's not just in the church setting, that it has to be in every aspect, every day, every part of your life. We have doctors, we have nurses, we have lawyers, we have business owners, and that we challenge them that if you can begin to live this way in your own life, your people will see it, and you are more open to creating that in your corporate way of life. And we actually have someone that Collins, that's part of Wellspring. He's done a number of retreats, and he's with Mike Woodham's group, and he owns a massive company. And he started implementing this type of stuff in it, and has drastically changed the culture of his entire corporation. And it's beautiful to see because it's a trucking company. And so it's just like, and you wouldn't think that that would be a business that you could really like, let's talk about your emotions. But he learned how to just be natural about it in his own life. And to exhibit the change of him and how he deals with every single person in his life, not just his Wellspring group, that it created that place to where he could bring it into his own people and challenge his people. And so showing them that, like, this is not just a church thing. This is an every aspect, every portion of your life thing.
Mhm.
Based on what you've seen with, let's say, someone in your congregation or new to your church, they haven't heard much about this. What do you how do you approach them to tell them the value of this wholehearted? How do you define wholehearted, and how do you I don't know, make the case that they should dig in to this
Yeah.
and be a part of this community oriented vulnerability?
Yeah, one is, I invite them into conversation, at the table. So either, food or coffee. It is not a sidestep conversation. It is not a, "Hey, let me catch you on the backside of Sunday morning," or in passing. It's a full in-depth of explaining how I got here, and the change that I've seen in my own life, in my kids' lives, in my husband's life, in every church that I've been a part of since I've started working through this. If you ask people that knew me before I started this entire journey and that people I know now, they will tell you that there's a drastic change. Um, and I will even, I've done this, is that as I've invited other ladies into this process, I give them my spill of exactly what I just said. And then I say, you know what? If you want more, like, go talk to LG, go talk to Meg, go talk to Deandra, and let them tell you their experience. And I said, and they're going to tell you how much they pushed back. And they're going to tell you that they asked to repeatedly to step out of this and that I repeatedly said, just give me one more week. Just give me one more week. And then let's look at where you're at then. So go ask them their honest opinion of what their life was like before and what their life is like now. Then come back to me and let's have conversations. I think that showing, and one thing that I've noticed is that I have, as a pastor, a built-in authority to some people, not to everyone, but to some people. And that I have to be aware that it can't just come from me as a pastor. It has to
It's not an
come.
order.
It's not.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's also is that, your pastor tells you this and your pastor tells you that, and it's great and fantastic, but they're a pastor, right? Like it's acceptable for them. They need to go to that level, right? For whatever reason, people have that understanding. But if you can point them to everyday, in their minds, everyday people that have experienced this, and they can tell you a before and after, that's where you get true, I'm not going to say buy-in. I know that's like where my brain wants to go, but it'll give them a true stepping into the deep end with you, even if they don't understand what the deep end really is. But they will follow you after that.
Bobbi, I have really enjoyed. I feel like you've kind of throughout the conversation, we've got this full arc of whether it's you've painted a picture of staff members in the church or just members of the church and business members where you've got this productivity mindset, your head is down, and there's this sense of, we didn't use the word isolation, but when your head is down and you're focused on productivity, you're really in isolation and you connect with people only for the sake of the product, right? Whatever I'm trying to execute.
Yep.
And so in terms of our internal world, we're living kind of cut off in an isolation. And then you've painted this arc, this storyline of taking risk, inviting people in, these women taking a risk, but slowly beginning to taste something deeper, something richer. You said marriages are stronger, these deeper relationships. And what I'm hearing is this pull out of this drawing out of isolation into community where people are tasting rich and full things. And I just think everybody, that's really what our hearts long for.
Very much so. And I think that is one of the biggest ahas for almost all the ones that have gone through it, since I've been here, is how alone they were, and how lonely they were. And because they didn't trust community. And that was hard. I think that was probably one of the hardest awareness moments that I had, is that here I have people that have dedicated their life to helping others step into community that struggled with it for themselves. Um, and so watching them say yes to it and begin to trust in it and to boldly live into it, just really gives you all the hope that you could ever need and ever want. And it's really shows you what life can be like when we begin to live out of the heart that God is continuing to make and mold in us, and the heart that He originally created in us. And they begin to taste and see that it is good and it is right. And it is trustworthy because He is trustworthy. And they can begin to hear His voice, either for the first time truly, or in a louder way than they ever have before.
It's certainly the case in the churches that I've been a part of that many people don't experience it. They feel alone. It
Mhm.
sounds like that's a consistent theme for
Yeah.
you, and it's been for others that I've talked to as well. And you're seeing the fruit. You've validated the problem by the conversations that you've had. You've seen the fruit of people moving into authentic biblical community. What's the roadmap for you as
Hmm.
you seek to build and expand this reality of rich biblical community?
I think the roadmap changes ever so often. This is the fun part about following God, is that um, my brain, when we first started this, I was like, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. It's going to go like this, it's going to go like that. And what I've been really intentional about from the very beginning is to step out of the way and let the Holy Spirit lead me every second and every moment of this journey. And I have told the men, my faithful men, that this is the long game. We're not, um, we're not here for a sprint. It's a full on marathon. And we could do this fast, and we could have every single person in the church um, be a part of this tomorrow. But I don't believe that's what God's calling us to do. And so my roadmap is having what I think and what I dream and what I hope will happen, is that eventually our entire congregations will begin to experience and live out of a whole heart. But then trusting that it'll take a mustard seed type of moments every step of the way, and be good with that and be okay with that, because that is where God is at. That I'm trying my best to set aside the brain that got created in me when I started ministry, that if you don't have hundreds of people involved in this overnight, then it's not a success. Um, True transformation takes time. Um, Life transformation, marriage transformation, church transformation, body of Christ transformation takes little moment after little moment after little moment. Um, and trusting in that and celebrating every step of the way when I see all of these moments happen, when families come back together, when people begin to believe that they are loved by God. And then when I see people love others that they didn't know how to love because they didn't understand that God first loved them. Um, so my roadmap is a little weird at this point. Um, I really hope and pray that in 5 years that the majority of my church will begin to taste and see and understand what this is and at least have stepped into the process. And in 10 years, my church will have transformed an entire city.
Mm.
You know, that's the dream. That's the roadmap. Um, Trusting God in the midst of it. And if it needs to get reworked, then it'll get reworked. But I already see like little moments of it happening. And so that just brings me hope.
Wow, Bobbi. Your vision for things, your excitement, your energy, your propensity to think big, um, big enough for God to step into, like, hey, I'm gonna follow where he's going. And you have dreams that I don't know, I just really resonate with what you're saying. I find myself championing, what you guys are up to and this dream that you've articulated. So hats off to you. I am cheering you on.
Thank you. We need the cheering. We need the prayers. Because the reality is that we live in Southern Alabama, and vulnerability is super hard, and it is scary for so many. And that is something that God is going to have to really work on for people to even just say yes to exploring how to be vulnerable, exploring to um, we I had a meeting yesterday, and we were doing some training, and my senior pastor pulls out the feelings chart, and he is like, you are very aware of this. And we started talking about it because I have a feelings wheel pillow in my office that um one of my ladies who's leading a group when I first started this, she's a counselor. She gave it to me because I used to be scared of the feelings wheel, and rightfully so for a minute. But I just looked at him and we started laughing because the next thing out of his mouth, because the video was about to say it, was how hard men have it to be able to say a feeling word. They can say great, but to define what great is, it's like pulling teeth. And so, I think it's even worse in Southern Alabama that, having men to be able to define that, and women to break out of the mold that I'm not okay and I need to talk about it. That's a huge thing too. So all the prayers and all the cheers, we need them.
Yeah. Yeah, the feelings chart is an interesting thing. I before I got involved in this, I thought of myself as someone who understood feelings really well. And the first time someone asked me what I was struggling with, and I told them, and then they said, "How do you feel?" I found myself completely unable to answer.
Yeah.
And they handed me a feelings chart, and I was embarrassed. Like, am I really that much of a dope that I can't name a feeling?
Yeah.
But that began a process of me really valuing what feelings charts can do for us. I'm curious, what's your take on what being able to articulate a feeling does in a situation? You're in a situation,
yeah.
you're explaining it, someone says, "Here, pick a feeling off the feelings wheel or the feelings chart." What's the value of that?
Yeah, one, I always have to bring out the chart. I have to pull it up on my phone because my brain still is like, no, you're not going to say it. You're not going to figure out what it is. Freedom. It brings freedom. Like, it brings freedom to bring it out into the surface, out into the air. It brings freedom to being able to let go of it and not live in it. Which is really what happens when we don't name them, is that we just live in it and we are lost, and we're beginning to wonder why we're blowing up, why we are disconnecting, and we can't figure it out. And it's because we don't have the vocabulary. Because that feelings wheel did not exist when I was in elementary school. I'm sorry, but we never talked about it. And it rocked, and I first learned it from my clinical pastoral education, the unloving moment and space. But and that's why my brain was like, I hate this thing. I can't handle this thing. And now I'm like, would you like my pillow to look and see what you want to say to me? It's fantastic. I promise you. But it does. It brings freedom in our lives. And there's so many of us that are walking around not living into the freedom that Christ brought to us. And that breaks my heart. And
Hmm.
so I think that's one of the things that compels me with all of this is that I really want people to understand and experience the freedom that Jesus speaks of. Um, and I think it starts with this, starts with getting to know the person that he's created and the person that the world's trying to create, and to go back into the person that he is making and molding.
That's so good, Bobby. The freedom to live in what Christ is calling you into and that which he died for. Um, I think so often we think because we're in the church, because we believe doctrinally the right things, that we're there already, that, we believe, so then we're living in the freedom. But you're sharing that there's a freedom that we're not accessing. And
Yeah, I
that's
really,
pretty significant.
and it's what I've seen over and over again that and I think I've always said that it's so easy to talk about how God loves us and God loves others, and we should love others through his love. And we can say it from the mountaintop, we can say it in every single area of our lives. But if we don't know it to be true in our own lives, there's something missing. And
Mhm.
what's missing is God himself, and what's missing is Christ himself. I said this the other day when I was preaching on Palm Sunday, is that my biggest fear in life is that we will be that crowd on the Mount of Olives that is still screaming, "Save me, save me, save
Mm.
me," because we never truly understood and got to know the King that came unto us. And that's a part of this, is that we will never experience that true, complete freedom until we get to know the person that God loves ourselves. And it takes some deep rooted work to get to know that person and then get to know who that person is actually should be, could be, and will be through Christ alone.
That's so well said, Bobby, and, it's an inspiration to hear you describe your own journey, your personal journey, and the way that you have brought your passion to your church and introduced that to other people and encourage them to take the risk
Mm,
of getting to know themselves so that they can connect better to God and for what Jesus has in store for them.
yeah.
So, we really appreciate you taking the time to share your story with us today. Thank you for being a part of our conversation.
Thanks for allowing me and inviting me to the table. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.